Nigeria saves ₦1 trillion from financial reforms in the public sector. Federal government sees significant impact in governance from digital economy. And derivatives trading tops Securities and Exchange Commission 2020 Priority Plus. Oil prices jump as tension in the Middle East builds up. The program is Business Express, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I am Amina Nujaim. Welcome. Past Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mohammed Kyari Dikwa, says financial reforms in the public sector have saved the nation about ₦1 trillion. Mohammed Kyari also said that the reforms created more transparency and accountability in line with the desires of the present administration.
We have recovered over 300 billion. But the challenge we face is how to settle those who give us the tips, because we are finding it very difficult to identify them or let public to know, or even convince the government to say that these are tip receipts. And for us to compensate them is a problem. So these are challenges. I believe once the whistleblowing protection bill is put in place, the challenges will be addressed. The Presidential Initiative on Continuous Audit has also blocked leakages and then the wastages associated with the budget implementation.
And the drive by the federal government to promote digital economy is yielding significant impact in governance, education, economy, and increased revenue generation. Stakeholders who shared their thoughts are of the view that greater impact is possible across board if the issues of stable power supply, high bank charges, and establishment of broadband infrastructure are addressed. Joy Uzo explains.
In pursuant of the promotion of digital economy, the federal government recently launched the National Digital Economy Policy. Part of the objective is to help the Nigerian government and their citizens leverage on the huge potentials inherent in the sector to grow the economy and create jobs. In Rivers State, the University of Port Harcourt is housing one of the regional innovation and incubation centers intended to training people on ICT engineering skills towards stimulating the digital economy.
If you want to establish a digital society, there is need for you to have centers where indigenous and citizens are going to be trained.
The BVN, for instance, the IPPIS payment salary, the single treasury account. These have all helped.
The successes recorded in e-commerce, e-taxation, transportation, agriculture and education, to some experts, are a huge contribution to the development of digital economy. However, there are still concerns about poor power supply, broadband infrastructure, and high charges associated with e-banking transactions.
But there are not challenges that cannot be surmounted. What we have to do is to pull in more people, create knowledge, teach people, and invest in technology to enable us leverage the opportunities that lay in there.
Meanwhile, a case in point are the gains developers of apps like eBay, Amazon, Facebook, Google and the rest have made through digital economy. The experts say this is a gold mine for young Nigerians to tap into as they called for training and self-development on ICT skills, bearing in mind that Nigeria has a population advantage to maximize the benefits of the emerging digital economy. So far, a recent release by the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that for the third quarter of 2019, the contribution of information and communication technology to Nigeria's gross domestic product surpassed that of the oil and gas sector in the second quarter of same year.
The year 2019 has come and gone with the number of economic activities worthy of mention. How are these events going to shape the economic prospects for 2020 in Nigeria? I'm now being joined by Tefa Abraham, an economist, to take a look at prospects for 2020. Always a pleasure to have you. Happy New Year.
Nice to see you again. Happy New Year, Amina.
Great. Okay, let's start the conversation talking about the new year. President Muhammadu Buhari, in his New Year letter to Nigerians, highlighted some key areas like infrastructure, electricity, and security, and of course some major national issues. How do you see these things shaping Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you again, Amina. All of those items you mentioned now, as you rightly quoted from the president's speech, are all targeted to address infrastructural gap. And with the return of the budget cycle to January 1st to December 31st, I think it's the right move by the president to immediately roll out his intention regarding those sectors. Because as the budget cycle has gone back to January 1st to December 31st, we can now begin to have capital projects, especially those that are critical in addressing infrastructural deficit, to begin to be implemented as at when due. So that's very
now in checking this infrastructure deficit, which key areas do you see should receive priority?
Well, power, basically. And again, like the president has rightly done, he has removed power from its cousins of works and housing. So power can now be given that huge attention that is required. However, beyond just spelling out intentions for what will be done for the power sector, Nigerians need to see light at home. So there needs to be a bottom-up approach towards power sector planning, involve more stakeholders towards addressing every hiccups that exist in the power supply value chain.
Okay. In the last year, we saw CBN being a bit aggressive in the Nigerian economy, from stability of price to exchange rates to being more aggressive on the restrictive list of items to be banned. Now, moving into 2020, do you see them doing more, and do you see it producing positive results?
Okay, basically, even though the Nigerian economy has grown significantly since the 2016 negative shock that took us to a recession, by and large, Nigeria is still suffering from, it's still yet to recover effectively from the negative terms of trade shock that took us to a recession in the first place in 2016. So as the whole idea is that CBN will also want to remain aggressive, I may use your word, aggressive in this term now, meaning maintaining the part of tight monetary policy. Tight monetary policy for CBN is aggressive. Expansionary is being loosed. So tight in the sense that they want to ensure that there's exchange rate convergence. It stays around that 306, 305 and does not just go up any in an uncoordinated manner. Also, the rise in inflationary trend in the last three months, CBN also want to maintain, if I may use your word, the aggressive pattern to ensure that the inflation rate does not escalate. So we expect tight monetary policy. Already the fiscal side is expansionary. So CBN again, we remain aggressive.
Yes. Aggressive in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. To ensure price stability and ensure inflation stays low, ensure that our fiscal structural policies are balanced, especially from the fiscal angle. Exactly.
Okay. Now, growth in 2020 it's being projected to be bright with a bit of fragility, just like 2019. Now, with the drive to diversify Nigeria's economy, do you see the oil sector being the main driver of the economy in 2020?
The oil sector has always been a huge part of determining Nigeria's GDP growth. Even though that may be good news, but for economists, that's in a way bad news. Because GDP should be driven by a multi-sectoral approach. Should be driven by small-scale businesses, large-scale businesses, saloon businesses, banking businesses, Mekosi businesses, Malam's businesses, Glo, MTN, all. Everything should be driving the GDP. Services, Nollywood, everything should be driving GDP. But in Nigeria, we find ourselves in this situation where oil remains the major factor. And the problem about oil driving Nigerian GDP is that once there's a shock, you see the effect immediately spilling over on GDP. Already with the GDP, most organizations that projected Nigeria's GDP. Let
me come in here a little bit. You're talking about oil prices, and I'm thinking the United States. Do you see that shock of the dynamics playing out in the oil market thanks to the United States affecting Nigeria?
Yeah, again, like I was saying, the way it works is this. Oil definitely is a driver of GDP for monolithic economy like Nigeria, which the current administration is doing its best to diversify. So once there's a positive shock in oil price, we will see the impact immediately on Nigerian GDP through the revenue pass-through. But again, because we don't determine their prices, a little news just from the Middle East that took it up can also bring it down. And the United States and its allies will not just sit down to watch oil prices skyrocket. So as soon as there's a positive shock in the oil market, the United States will be doing its best to ensure they push out supply in terms of substitute to crude oil and crude oil itself to ensure that the prices stabilize. So beyond relying on oil driving our GDP, it's important to remain, as this government has projected, to see how other aspects of the economy will remain vibrant and become a good growth determinant. But so long as oil is concerned, I foresee many organizations like IMF, World Bank that have already projected slight growth for Nigeria in 2020. I see many of them revising it down again slightly. So, but in the next 3 quarters, Nigerian GDP growth definitely is optimistic in terms of growing, but maybe slow, at a very slow rate.
Okay, I'm going to take you back a bit. You're talking about infrastructure deficits. Now, the Africa Development Bank says it's looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and it's also looking at investment in infrastructure. Now, sort of when there's a complement with government efforts and the Africa Development Bank, what do you see playing out? Okay,
the African Development Bank is part of multilateral development banks. And the way this thing works is no economy exists in isolation. Already, there are many sources of information in terms of getting Nigeria's economic projection. But one that's very reliable and all governments key into it is IMF's Article 4. IMF's Article 4 projects an increase in private investment and private savings for Nigeria for 2020, but a decline in public savings and public investment. And in Nigeria, public sector being a major player means that public sector bad economics, if I may, is likely to crowd out private sector effort through through its savings and investment. So public sector may want to shore up its projected decline in savings and projected decline in investment by attracting foreign direct investment and borrowing. But again, the environment for private sector to invest has to exist. And private sector investment is sensitive to a lot of covariate risks, including security, including unpredictable macroeconomic policy environment and things like that. But so with the partnership between the Nigerian government in terms of policy-wise now with the African Development Bank, what we see coming from there is a lot of support from African Development Bank to Nigeria. But they too will not just do it as a big brother of Nigeria. They'll be watching out for our macroeconomic health before they determine how much to push and, if possible, to what extent.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, talking about events that shaped 2019, I'm thinking Brexit. And also talking about diversifying Nigerian economy and the non-oil sector. Do you see, particularly, say, in agriculture, markets opening up?
Yes, I would say yes. I see market opening up because you mentioned something important: the African Free Trade Agreement. That agreement is expected to kickstart around July. And already the macroeconomic indices for now shows that countries like South Africa are most likely in a position to have higher gains than countries like compared to countries like Nigeria. So if we bring that together in the context of border closure, you begin to see Nigeria playing a smart move to ensure that its domestic, how will I call it now, sources of growing through the agri sector and other sectors are rightly positioned. Because so long as borders are opened uncontrollably, they are likely to suffocate local farmers, small-scale farmers who are into rice production and all those things that would have produced rather than relying on imports. But given that, be that as it may, even though the border closure may favor Nigeria, it's also important to remember that Nigeria does not exist in isolation. When we exist in partnership, it's a globalized world. So while we are closing the border with one hand, let's also try and see how we can use the other hand to open it, having in mind that our manufacturers in here are not in isolation. There's value chain of supplies in terms of inputs.
To what extent would you say the current border closure has checked smuggling? Talking about free trade within African countries.
For Nigeria, it has checked smuggling. Official statistic, one will say yes, it has been able to tame smuggling to a large extent. Okay. But informally, we still see these things come in. Everything that has been banned, from basmati rice, all the rice, we still see them coming into they will flood restaurants. So there's need to ensure that the border closure is not just done in a way that we encourage smuggling, but should be done in a way that will totally discourage smuggling. And the only way that can be done is to ensure that all stakeholders, especially Lagos Chamber of Commerce, these people the people in the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, you need to really carry them along so that they will let you know the cost and benefit of border closure and where it hurts them and what should be done. It's not too nice for policies like border closure should be taken 100% from a top-down approach. There are a lot of manufacturers down there who depend on import and intermediate goods to feed in their little small-scale enterprise. So when you close the border, they will definitely find a way, and custom will just be engaged in catching smugglers and burning of those goods, and which also has environmental effects. There's the drug aspect and so many things like that. So it's important. For Nigeria, it has favored, but for countries like Benin, I'm not sure they'll be smiling. So you see a lot of these countries coming to Nigeria to seek President Muhammadu Buhari's attention to see how this thing can be eased. But let's remember that we are the big brother of ECOWAS. So while we are closing the border, let's have in mind others. And again, and that's what I like in the move the president has made. We also have to remember the security aspect of border opening and border closure, which is one thing we can also take out of
Okay, something
context.
else comes to mind concerning this border closure. Where do you see the inflationary pressure? Do you see it persisting?
Inflationary pressure for 2020 is likely to be high because already the last 3 months, inflation is just high up there. It's still double digits. Secondly, the expectational effect of increase in minimum wage is there. The expansionary budget of 10.59 trillion is there. Then the likelihood that border closure means less supply of immediate demand for goods also creates an inflationary gap that will benefit farmers but tail off on household and individuals who buy these things. So generally, the CBN, which is the Apex Bank, has a very serious mandate of ensuring price stability, and I have no doubt that the CBN will not just sit down and look like that. They will put in place a lot of tight monetary policy measures and others that we cannot necessarily see their moves from TV here to be able to curtail inflationary trend.
Okay, let's digress a little bit.
Okay.
How do you see the finance bill facilitating the implementation of the 2020 budget?
The finance bill, from the word go, as President Muhammadu Buhari GCFR has made clear, is to shore up revenue that we have not really had to fund our budget from 2016, 17, 18, 19. And all the components of the finance bill, VAT increase and other palliatives like CIT, ease of doing business are all there. But the key component there, and let's also not forget the deep shore offshore production sharing contract bill that was also amended there. So the whole idea is to ensure that there's more revenue for the government to be able to finance its public expenditure. So it's important that every effort is given to that finance bill to see how much the government can get. Okay,
now in closing, what would be your, should I say, general forecast for 2020?
My general forecast for 2020 is that GDP will grow, but at a very slow rate. So to complement that, Nigeria needs to do a lot of in-house, effort to ensure that the growth is sustained. And this growth that I'm talking about is to ensure timely implementation of capital budget. And again, let's not forget, we can't just be talking of monetary financial variables as if they're not connected to human beings. There are also households who must feel the positive impact of this positive growth in GDP. To that extent, we need to also sit up in our social investment programs and ensure that all those promises contained in the social investment programs are actually being carried out, and the aspects of the population being targeted are having access to those programs.
Thank you so much, Tefa Abraham, for your insight.
Thank you very much
into
again,
2020. Always a pleasure having you on the program.
Same. Thank you very much.
Now moving on, the Securities and Exchange Commission says the development of an efficient derivatives trading market is one of its top priorities in 2020. The Acting Director General Sec. Mary Uduk, who said this, noted that this is a good time to have derivatives in the capital market as some of the investable products capable of boosting liquidity in the capital market, while reiterating that derivatives are traded in all the big markets around the globe and are used in risk management. The SEC boss added that they are also used to hedge the trade in other securities. Investors gained 266.36 billion naira week on week as Nigerian Stock Exchange O-Share Index inches up by 2.09% to close the week positive. Muplang Dakok has details.
The market opened for 4 trading days last week because Wednesday, 1st January 2020 was a public holiday to mark the New Year's celebrations. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 2.09% to close the week at 26,968.79 and 13.019 trillion naira. A total turnover of 2.3 billion shares worth 21.6 billion naira in 14,906 deals were traded in the week by investors. The financial services industry measured by volume led the activity chart with 1.9 billion shares valued at 10 billion naira traded in 9,287 deals. The conglomerates industry followed with 188.5 million shares, while the third place was occupied by the industrial goods industry. Trading in the top 3 equities, Omoluabi Mortgage Bank PLC, Transnational Corporation of Nigeria, and Zenith Bank accounted for 1.131 billion shares worth 3.6 billion naira in 2,249 deals. A total of 204,300 units of federal government bonds valued at 237.2 million naira were traded in the week in 4 deals. All indices finished higher with the exception of the NSE ASEM index, which closed flat. 44 equities appreciated in price during the week. 24 equities depreciated in price, while 97 equities remained unchanged.
For Monday's trading on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange began the week on a positive note. The NSE O-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 1.38% and market capitalization stood at 13.1 trillion naira. Investors traded 526 million shares in 5,784 deals valued at 5.3 billion naira. Dangote Cement, Flour Mill and Nascon led the gainers, while losers were led by Seplat, MTN Nigeria and Unilever. Zenith Bank, Universal Insurance and UBA were the toast of investors. And Asian Pacific markets mostly fell on Monday following heightened geographical tensions in the Middle East. Muplang Dakok again reports.
Global tensions elevated last week after Iran's top military commander was killed in a U.S. strike in Baghdad, which raised concerns of retaliation from Iranian forces. Oil prices surged 3% on Friday on worries that potential conflicts between the U.S. and Iran could disrupt energy production in the region. In early trading Monday, 6 January, Asia markets mostly fell following heightened geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, with Nikkei clinging 1.91% to close at 23,204.86. Hang Seng Index was down 1.79% in afternoon trade, and Shanghai Composite eased morning gains to trade nearly flat at 3,083.41. Stocks in the United States dropped in early trading. Dow Jones dropped 233 points, indicating a lower open of more than 193 points. Futures on the S&P 500 and Nasdaq indices were also lower. European stocks also traded lower as investors monitored rising tensions between the United States and Iran. In Africa, stocks were mixed, with Nairobi's all-share index and Namibia's overall index, as well as Ghana's JSE Composite Index, posting gains.
Thank you, Muplang. That wraps up Business Express for today. Join us again on Wednesday for another edition, but you can access all previous episodes on YouTube on NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is @NTA News Now, #BizExp. Thanks for watching. I am Amina Nushain.